All right, today I'm bringing you another run fits out of the three safety defense. This time, unlike last time we looked at Iowa State, now we're going to look at Baylor and Phil Snow's three safety defense. And he was the DC there in 2019. This is their game against TCU. He's now obviously the DC at Carolina Panthers. But I want to look at, again, run fits, defense, line, linebacker, safeties, how everything fits together. You know me, it's not going to be all positive. There will be some negative stuff in there. But really want to look at it through the lens of teaching it as I would in high school. So let's get started. We're going to look at the first play here as a zone read. This is the first play of the game. Before we start, some of the things that I really like about this defense is Phil Snow, I think, does a great job of having a lot of movement pre-snap. First, you're going to see he's giving a base look of the three high, kind of a five-man box when you talk about 10 personnel spread formations. All of a sudden, cadence begins, and all of a sudden, guys roll, and now we're to a 3-3 stack inverted man, or could be a cover three with the middle field closed. So just a drastic kind of change in concept just by a few different moving pieces, and something that you can do when you're coming from the top down with your safety. So definitely a positive that I see in this three safety defense is there's some maneuverability in how where you can get guys and change up how the looks that you're giving pre-snap to the defense, and just making those guys think on the run. There's two things that I really look at in this play. You can see it's a zone read, keep by the quarterback. Really has a chance to make this into a big play once he kind of catches that edge. So two things we're going to talk about. First, we're going to look at the DN and the linebacker relationship, and how, especially in a 3-3 stack, a lot of these guys are really responsible for these two gaps. So either I'm out, you're in, or he's in, I'm out. And that can work. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's got to get into the B gap. It could be here he gets a down block. And when you get a down block, the DN can chase and basically cover the B gap from the backside, and now we exchange, and now we're contained. Or you can plug the backer here, which is kind of what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to plug the backer, and they're going to sit with the D end and keep leverage on the ball carrier. So leverage, really, when you talk about the way this backfield set up, is near back has got to keep leverage. Whoever's outside keeps leverage on the near back. So here, before the mesh happens, it's really I got to keep my leverage on the running back because he's the closest back to me. Once the mesh occurs, now it's got to be I got to keep leverage on the quarterback. And again, this is either the DN crashing. It's either the DN staying outside or the linebacker when he exchanges with the DN. Whoever's outside must keep contained. And so you can see he squeezes in just a little bit enough, almost gives that quarterback enough room to catch that edge. And if they do, they're kind of in a bad situation here of either block here, one-on-one with the safety, or since he's beating him inside, we go get the safety now, and it's a one-on-one with the down safety and the quarterback. Luckily enough, you get great effort by the backside backer and the mic, and effort can always cover up a lot of issues and a lot of mistakes in a play, which is something when you coach defense, effort's got to be the number one thing. Technique can be taught. Effort obviously can't be taught. So that second effort by those backers changes what could have been a bad kind of play into just a 1 yard gain from that zone pull. The second thing I want to talk about before we look at the next play is kind of the differences of what you're playing in coverage versus what you're going to get in the run fit. So when you play kind of man concepts, and this isn't necessarily man, but there are some principles that they're using here. When you do play man, a lot of times you don't get those DBs looking at the mesh, especially here with this inverted safety. He's going to get hands on two before he peeks into the mesh. So he'll join, but he'll typically join late because he's got eyes on his receiver. If it's true man right here, and we get an outside release, and they man turn, well, their eyes are away from the mesh, and they're not going to be able to join. Whereas in zone, kind of playing that true off zone, you get a better chance of everybody's eyes are inside. You got 22 eyes on the football. One of my mentors really described it best to me. It's the difference of, it's kind of like basketball. When you're playing man, you're denying passing lanes. So you're denying some things that are short. When you do give up plays, they're typically going to be big plays because it's one-on-one matchups. So they get behind you. Sometimes there's nowhere to have help. But if you're playing zone, you're going to give up some of those soft looks like that, but you're going to give up a lot more plays short, rally to the ball, but you're not going to give up a lot of deep shots because you've got help behind. So just things to consider when you're running your coverages is what are you trying to do with the run fits too? Or are you trying to rely a lot on your front if you're playing man, or do you want to have help with your secondary guys in the fits? Well, then you want to play a little bit more zone. So just something to think about when it comes to coaching, especially at the high school level. Um, winning one-on-one matchups can be difficult for a lot of kids. So you want to have those guys added to the fits, and so playing zone is typically your best bet to get that done. But again, good effort by that backside Mike, and what would be kind of the rover of the sand, and that's enough to make a bad play kind of into just a 1 yard gain. So let's. So here's a wing set from TCU. This is just basically going to be a missed gap assignment. It's just kind of a down zone with your motion to kind of misdirection, and the misdirection does kind of um, get Baylor out of their gap. So what happens here is you can see that they're trying to bump this over, pass this off. This guy doesn't carry over. And usually what would happen is either he would bump across straight with him, or this cornerback would go straight with him, or bump to bump to bump. And you should have an extra guy, but without bumping over, now you've lost a guy to that side. Because what will happen here is now you're good gapped up here, you're gapped up inside here between the guard, center, and guard. Good between the guard tackle. You're outside good. You're outside good. You're basically have a +1 over here where you don't really need it because you're inside. You're inside, and really this guy's gap is right here. But with this motion, we're adding gaps, so he kind of peels off. You're losing a gap up top, and now this backer right here would normally be responsible for filling this A, kind of gets over the top a little, and that safety's really got to be the one to come down and fill there. So it's either here an exchange or outside, and I'm in. The problem is they both kind of leak over the top. They give up that A gap, and just nobody there to make the tackle, and splits that line pretty nice. Good hole right there. Great job from that up top guard of kind of sealing off that D end. And this is a good point here of you can see this DB's eyes are to the mesh, and so he sees that it's a run, is able to trigger and help, and he's the one that actually chases it down. If this was kind of man coverage, for the most part, it may not be, but if he plays it like it's kind of zone, because if it's man, he gets stuck on this guy, doesn't able to pull back and help. But his eyes are to the mesh, sees that it's a run, can pull off his man now and run, and makes a tackle. So again, good effort, saves a touch. All right, and then in this 10 personnel play, you can see that Baylor doesn't roll to their 3-3 stack, kind of one high inverted man look. They stay in their 3 high safety look, and this gives a great example of how these safeties are able to fit really quick when we talk about things that are on the perimeter. Here you're going to get a toss to the running back, so it catches the edge quick. You're going to get some true reach blocks from the O-line, kind of sealing off D-line and linebackers. And the issue that they get into is this really should only be about a 3-yard play, because you could see where we gapped up here, we gapped up inside. Now we've got to fill here, and now we either have options. We either stay outside and fill underneath, or get and jump inside and fill outside. But we've got to maintain the gap integrity all the way across. And what happens is interiorly we do a good job here. He stays underneath, and now this Mike does a great job coming under his guy, ducking and ripping, getting underneath. This guy's maintaining his leverage really, really well up into a point where he now decides, I'm going to peek inside, and now this safety who's fitting off of this guy, now we have 2 guys in a gap. Running back makes a great cut. We're sealed on the corner here, and he's going to get about 10 to 12 extra yards. So what should have happened is maintain your gap, fill inside. We're gapped up. Everything's good. Here's our +1. Instead, guys peek into gaps, and now you're 2-3 heads in a gap here, and giving up a crease to where a guy gets some extra yardage. So when those safeties fit, the quicker these guys can fit and set their gaps and where they're at, set their edges, the quicker these guys can fill. So we want to set it quick, hold your leverage right here, fill inside out, and not give up those extra yards. Again, it should have been a 3-yard play instead of what turns into a 15, 16-yard run. This play, TCU comes out in their 20 personnel gun split with stacked wide receivers out pretty wide. Again, you can see Baylor kind of starts in the 3 high shell, and as the play develops, they eventually roll into that inverted 1 high 3-3 stack. Um, and you can see that from a 20 personnel, quarterback comes out, and now you have Wildcat alert, double pass, whatever they're calling. And here we have zone read. And it goes back to that first play that we talked about of how you play the zone read, how you play the down block with your DN and linebacker. Here they do a great job of we're gonna come down the line, cover up that B gap from the backside, and exchange and keep everything on the outside shoulder. The only thing that I'm not super fond of here is I want this to be tight, and then I want to get continue to come and work towards that shoulder of the near back. So as this back goes away, the near shoulder now becomes the quarterback's shoulder. They do a good job of exchanging, except for he kind of sits here. We always want to get to heel line. When we can get to heel line, we know we're behind the line of scrimmage. We're behind the lineman. They can no longer block us. If you stay towards the line of scrimmage, you can still continue to be blocked out. Luckily here, the quarterback trips, but I think they would have maintained leverage. So again, just looking at in this play, we're gapped up here, inside, outside, B gap, A gap covers the B gap from the backside, exchanges the C gap. We're gapped up across the front. +1 here, who's not able to be blocked because they're running a stacked wide receivers out top. So could have been a good job and maintain leverage. The reason why we want it tight, as you can see, as he starts to bubble out, he's just increasing this gap wider and wider. We want to stay tight to the pile when we gap exchange, and we want to get to the heel line and be sitting here. Now we can't get blocked by him, and we can squeeze this shoulder and not give up the outside, but also not let him cut under into a big open gap. So we'll play it one more time. And this one we'll actually look at the butt shot. So you see how that DN covers up that B gap from the backside. Linebacker exchanges, but as he starts to go out, we're just opening up this gap. So when we exchange, we want to be tight and get to heel line and not allow that gap to be widened. And you can see across the other gap, we're good, gapped up here. We're outside here. We're going to, again, cover this B gap from the backside. We exchange, hold leverage on your running backs, and you're good across the front, plus your safeties are +1s. Here TCU comes out in 11 personnel, and really this with the slot back, but this really, guys, really more of a fullback. So you could argue this is really more 21 personnel. You're going to see a split zone concept. The issue that we face here is with the 3 safety look, we know we've got a 6-man box. The problem is you have however many guys you have the line of scrimmage with offense, you've got to have one more. There's always one more gap to account for. So we have 7 guys here. We know we need 8 guys to the box to account for all our gaps. And you can see we're 2 men short. But what Baylor does is cool here is they trap the corners, and that's where they get their additional guys, knowing that they're watching the mesh. So if it is pass, they can hold and giving up enough time, kind of play it like a halves look. If it is a run mesh, they can trigger and fit and add to the run. So we get a split zone here, which essentially split zone is essentially really just if the running back cuts back, it's just essentially power. So you got to account for all your gaps. Oklahoma does a great job about in their offense. A lot of times DCs don't account for the running back as a blocker. So if you add him, you need 9. So now you need a safety to get into the box as well. But here it's just the running back, so it's 8 gaps that we got to account for. There's your split zone. So you're getting zone blocking, kind of tracking everybody. Your kind of kick out block coming from the fullback. The running back sees no zone, no opening right there. Baylor does a good job of anchoring down those points to the front side. He cuts back, and now you've got to account for these gaps. So somebody's got to be underneath this puller to spill it. The DN does a good job of maintaining that gap and gives this guy enough time to come scrape over the top and stay underneath the puller. And you see there's the trap corner from 2 coming down, and that's our extra guy to the fits, and we've now accounted for the gaps that pre-snap we weren't showing that we had in the box. This is a good job here of showing how two gap principles work with a three down. Aranda talks about this a lot when he, LSU is now the head coach here at Baylor. Talks about how you play two gap principles where guys got a primary gap to secondary gap. So you see the DN is going to play that C gap, does a great job holding it. The play is not not in my gap. The running back now crosses my face. I make my move to get to secondary gap, and now we've added one more guy at the point of attack and to make the tackle. So just a really cool way of how Baylor is adding guys to the box where they weren't accounted for in the first place. Let's look at it from the butt shot. You can see, let's pause it right there. So now you can see here, inside. We're short gaps here. But with the exchange, now we can go underneath. They've added a guy to that side now, essentially with the exchange. They are weak here, but safety can fill that kind of cutback lane. Underneath, spills it. There comes the trap corner. Spill it plus the DN playing secondary gap. Good move inside and shores it up for the stop on what looks like a big outmatch. I mean, right now I'm an OC. I'm thinking we've got the numbers. It's 8. Essentially 8 against 6 is in my mind what it looks like. And so the numbers are on our side. Let's run it. Here comes the trap 2 corner, adding numbers to the box, evens it up. Baylor makes a great play. This next 10 personnel play, we're going to look at Baylor shows, just like in that very first play we looked at, they show that 3 high look, and then all of a sudden it's more of a closer to a 3-3 stack, inverted, kind of middle of the field closed. But this is essentially it's what a lot of guys start to call zero play, which is basically an option play where they're reading first guy outside the B gap. But because it's a 4-eye and this is a tight front, this is more of a midline play because he's now the first guy outside of the A gap, whereas Veer is the first guy outside of the B gap. Essentially, they're trapping the end, making him wrong. If the running back gets it, it turns it into inside zone like it is here. If the quarterback pulls, now it almost turns into an ISO because they make him wrong, and now we've got lead block. This is a really good play if he would have pulled it. But Baylor gets kind of ungapped here, and it turns into a good play on the front side. So a few things that I see is kind of the issue I have with the tight front is how do you teach this? And again, I'm not an expert, so if any of you guys know how you would teach the exchange from the backer and the DN in a 4-eye, please leave that in the comments. I'd love to know because what happens is it's almost an influence block where he looks like it's a down block. Guys got to get, that's your shade, so you got to get hands on him. But now he kind of arc blocks to this second level, and now I've got to get outside. Well, it's pushed it far enough wide where you're just opening that gap even more. So I don't know how you would teach that if you go ahead and tell them both go inside, we'll fix it with the coverage. However, if this is man, he's not going to join the fit as much as you would want him to. And that's the second thing that I talked about a little bit of the difference between man and zone is that you get man eyes. So look at this down safety to the field right here. He's man eyes on number 2. You can see he doesn't even peek into the mesh until he gets hands on 2. So even if it is more of a kind of a cover 3 look is kind of how they're playing it, but they don't get they don't peek into the mesh until they get hands on it. So it really kind of is man into zone. And you can see as he begins to peek there, now I join the fit. And I'm there at the same time as the safety that's 25 yards back. So if this is zone, his eyes are to the mesh now. Even though he maybe shuffle out, he's still going to join now from 8 yards deep as opposed to when he does trigger, he's now at about 15 yards. So just that's the difference to me between why I like zone over man as much as I can. I mean, obviously there are situations where you want to play man and deny passing lanes, but for the most part I like zone because you're more run kind of engaged and can get guys to the mesh a little quicker. This is a great job from this joker safety in the middle of the field to trigger, come down and make a play. This really shouldn't have been much of a gain at all, just because quarterback gives it, now it turns into inside zone. Now let's look at it from the butt shot so you can kind of see what happens here is Baylor gets out of gap. You can see these guys, when it 3-3 stack, it's really these two working together, these two working together, these two working together. So whoever's outside and inside is just basically fitting off each other. So as this play develops, you should see I'm inside while I'm outside. He's there, well, I'm there. He's there, well, I'm there. And now you're gapped up. And what I like to teach defensive guys, it's really all about the gaps. I don't care really what the flow. I mean, the flow is important for the outside backers when you talk about triggering and quarterback cutback. But here, if you're worried about your gap more than where the flow of the ball is, it doesn't matter where he cuts back. If he bends it, if he jumps outside, we're good because we're gapped up, gapped up, gapped up, gapped up, gapped up, gapped up. What happens is guys tend to get kind of eyes in the backfield. They see flow, and you can see this Mike. Initially, he's stepping to the right gap. The center's doing a good job of not letting that guy chip up. But because he goes there and now he thinks, oh, he's going to cut back, I jump back just enough. That gives us chance a guy to chip up here, seals off the mic. And now what's happened here is now this DN, who should be responsible for this B gap, gets head up with the guard. And now the guard does a great job of turning his feet and sealing to the inside. And now we've given up this lane right here. Good vision from the running back. And because the DN's falling back inside, it's hard for him to then get back across. Guard gives him one good shove, and he's not able to get into the fit again. Just a play that should have been stopped by Baylor, but because they weren't gap sound, they gave up what should have been a 1 yard, if a no yard gain, into about a 10 to 12 yard gain. We'll play it one more fast time right here. And to me, I would come back to this play later on and get them to if they showed this line, this alignment again, is I would keep this now, because going back to this shot right here, if this quarterback keeps it, they've got numbers now. So he'll take that block. Now it's 1-on-1 with a deep safety in the quarterback. So something that as we start to watch a little bit more film, be interested to see if they come back to this and actually keep it, because they've got the numbers to the boundary side. One more time. It was a good cut, good vision by the running back there. This next play, you could tell that TCU is kind of up in the tempo. This is the next play after the play we just saw. You could tell that after they spotted the ball, they're snapping it quick. So they're playing up tempo. So Baylor's kind of more forced to stay in that 3 safety look. They don't have enough time to roll, but they are able to get from what looks like a 5-man box to a 7-man box pretty quickly, based on they drive 2 safeties down, play solo with the corners, and now they're manned up, and we can join the safety here. Linebacker can join here, and now we've got 7 guys at the point of attack, which we know that numbers is beneficial to Baylor here. But this is a great example of get a down block, chase what would be essentially the dive on the zone, exchange to pick up the quarterback. This is a great example of how you can cover for both with these 2 guys. So you can see they kind of more true. And this was, again, that last video we talked about, the difference between a 4-eye and a 5 is that the exchange is just a little bit better. So you see even though he doesn't get hands on him, that tackle is still forced to come down enough that it gives that backer a chance to get over the top. So the DN chases the dive, catches it from behind. Great job there, just because of the penetration of the nose on the double team there. Kind of holds him up just enough for that chasing DN. He's flat down the line going for it. And then you can see that they're covered. Even if he pulls it, which that almost should be a pull read right there, which makes me think sometimes these are design plays. They're not actually true read plays. This could be an RPO as well with this bubble from 3, which might not be a bad throw to make, because you're there, and he's got to chase it down as we're running behind. So again, they could come back to that a little bit later, but this is essentially true zone because they're tracking it out from the line. It's a great job of I've got the dive, I exchange for the quarterback, everybody's gapped up, and they're good to go. So we'll play it again from this, and then we'll look at it from the butt shot. Great job from the nose, penetrating and causing that running back to stop. And anytime a running back has to stop and restart, it's a chance for the D line or the linebackers to get there. You see on the snap, didn't get a lot of space there. It makes it a little bit tougher, but guy does a good job of jumping outside here, and the DN recovers by hauling Bud down the line. You tell if he was a little bit tighter and got hands on, he'd be there even sooner. There's the exchange. There, this guy's folding back inside. So even if the quarterback keeps it, they're good. See how you're covering up that B gap, because what this running back's thinking is we're just going to bend this zone back. He sees there's nothing on the front side. They're gapped up. Well, I'm going to bend that zone back. Well, there's the chasing DN from the backside to cover up that B gap. So it's a great example of how to exchange when you get a down block from a DN and a linebacker. Here we have another wing set from TCU, and this is an inside zone that has a cutback that he hits kind of the weak side A. But what you see initially, and again, they're slowed down just a little bit from that last play that we saw, but enough to where Baylor's going to man up the outside edges and make a 6-man box really into a 9-man box when you start adding safeties in there. Because initially what you see is 7 guys at the line of scrimmage or 2 guys short, so we need to add guys and get our +1 as well. What happens here is it's a great job from the O-line and the wing and the tight end of collapsing everything down. Backers are so tight that you're not really given much chance to exchange things. It's pretty much plug your gap, get everybody in set post. The problem is we're not setting enough of a post, so we know that pre-snap this is my gap right here in between the wing and the tight end. You start chasing flow, you're condensing down that edge, and you can see the ball's going to hit right here, which is kind of A, weak B. But that's they condense down so many gaps that cutback is pretty minimal, which is kind of what this zone play is designed to do. Inside zone, you should have a bend back right there. But what you can see is if we fill our gaps now, don't worry about flow, and we set post, you can see that, I'm going to put this cursor right here. That's where the ball actually should hit. And then what that should make him do is now, instead of cutting straight there, now he bubbles out. That gives extra time for the safety to get there. If the edge is condensed down, the safeties take a little bit longer to get there, and you get a play like this where they can get 6-7 yards just because you're a little bit soft. I know some 3 safety defenses want to give this illusion of we're a light edge, and then we roll into it, kind of the art of war where you kind of show your weakness, but knowing that you're gonna turn it into a strength here in just a second. But I don't know if they don't roll quick enough, or if we're playing kind of true zone and these guys are keying the mesh. But like I said, if we set a fence post, we set posts, and we stop this flow from happening, then you can get guys to get down a little bit quicker. When you talk about backers or running backs having to kind of express out a little bit or bend it back even more than they normally would. And this is a good example of why Bill Belichick talks a lot about slanting into a zone, is because you're setting those posts. If you were to slant into the zone, now we're slamming this, we're slamming this, we're slamming this, and you're setting those posts at a different position. Instead of kind of washing with the flow, you're setting hard edges. So sometimes slanting into a zone can be a really great way to set new edges and take things away. Let's look at it from the butt shot. You can see right away, we see this soft edge here. And we're gapped up across the front. The problem is our edges are soft. And with that cutback lane not being very drastic, just takes a little bit longer for those safeties to come down and fill. Now here we have a trips nub set, and they run what I'd call a gut play, or really it's a long trap. And you can see this guard. It's probably something they saw on film. He's kind of sitting pretty heavy on his heels. He's tipping that he's going to pull. But I like how linebackers are reading O-lineman rather than flow, because it gets guys to the point of attack when you start talking about gap schemes. So here, the problem with the nub set is now you're asking your corner sometimes to get involved in the fits, because what you'll get is he's going to arc block, so now we got to add to the outside. He's a down block, so I'm going to go ahead and close off, exchange, fit off the nose, fit off the end. The issue now you have is with that pulling guard, we've now condensed the gap here, and now we need guys towards the point of attack because you're adding essentially an ISO from the guard essentially. Now we need one guy outside, one guy inside of the ISO. The problem is that what is now becoming the play side guard chips up from the nose, kind of is able to seal that backer, and then you need somebody to fall back inside there. And either that's the responsibility of the nose to work back into that gap, or this backside linebacker who's kind of flowing and looking for first available gap. But the DN does a really, really good job up top of, I get a down block, I got hands on him, which gives the linebacker a little bit more time to get somewhere, even though he kind of takes his time, he stacks, he's kind of holding, and that gives the lineman enough time to get to the second level. But he does a great job of punching the hip and coming hard down the line and actually makes that tackle. So you can see they've got a crease right here where it's not going to be a one-on-one, but that DN from the backside makes a hell of a play, and it takes away a mistake. Even though the Mike's trying to now fall back in that gap, it still would have been a couple extra yards, whereas that DN makes a play, keeps it to a yard. So get it from the butt shot. That's sometimes the advantage or disadvantage of a nub set, is that you're asking this backside to be involved in the fits, and really he's got to read his guy. So if he blocks, I insert right now. If he releases, then I can release, because now that gap's being taken away. We're back to kind of being evened up on the front. So you can see pull, so we get it down and down. Really, I want this nose to hold this gap enough for him to come over the top, fill, because that gap is being added right here. So I need an outside-inside guy. I need a chase down the line because he's coming to get this guy, and I need to come over the top and play this cutback lane right here. What happens is the guard punches, chips up. Now we kick out, and now there's our lane for the running back to make his hole through, except for the backside DN does a great job of hands on your shade, and then work the heel line fast, make the play, and save an open gap. So it's a great job from the backside DN. Let's play it again. It's a good job of evening the numbers by playing your block correctly. All right, here's an empty personnel set that TCU motions back into 10 personnel, trip strong into the boundary. And this is a good example of why I think the exchange is so important, because you run into issues with losing edges. You get kind of a zone read concept here where you see the top side DN. It's a good job getting hands on. Should give enough of a push inside to where that gap exchange is easier, which is what he's supposed to do. The problem is he covers up that B gap by taking the heel line, chasing the dive, and the gap. The linebacker doesn't exchange, and so now essentially we have two heads in a gap. The pull is there. We're seal, and we're one-on-one. Whereas, doesn't get a lot out of this play, but this is a second and third. Now it turns into a 1st and 10, whereas if we gap exchange this, we're in a +1 advantage, and now we make the play here, and now we turn it into, instead of a 1st and 10, we're a 3rd and 5. We got a chance to get off the field. So just another reason why it's so important for, the way I teach defenses. I want that gap exchange is more important to me than, guys trying to get to the point of attack where they, they're reading the flow and not really working their gaps, because the B gap's covered. When the D lineman crashes that line and chases dive, he's covering that B gap. It just is from the backside, not the front side. So we don't need that backer in the B gap as well. I need him to exchange and then take the pull. If this is a true zone team, it doesn't hurt you as much if you want to have a down block and sit, because this is a guy that isn't going to be as much of a run threat. But when you have zone read teams, gap exchanging is crucial to playing good run defense. Let's look at it from the butt shot. So you can see had he given this, and that zone bends back into the B gap, you can see the DN takes care of the B gap. And the running back would have seen it and tries to hop outside. Um, you know, you could argue that they need to be a little bit better on the front side, but they're -1 in that. Um, so you need that center really to work through his gap to gain back that advantage. But because we lose the edge, backers inside, and good job from that slot receiver blocking that other backer. It's just enough of a crease to get that first down.